Hi everyone, welcome to Still Moments with Jesus. I'll be your host today, Brian Samuel Opati, and thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you listening to us from the US, happy Thanksgiving. Thank you so much for joining us as we discuss and talk about the family and what makes that so important, not just to us, but to society and why it's valued in the eyes of God. Now, as you know, there's a lot going on in our world. And here at Still Moments with Jesus, we are trying to spend time reading from God's Word, reading from the Scriptures, to figure out where could things be going wrong and how do we best understand our world in light of what the text reveals to us. So kindly join me as we tackle the topic of family and contention, when enough is never enough. And join me as we read from Luke 12, from verses 13 to 21. And I read. I'll be reading from the Passion Translation, 2020 edition. Jesus then spoke up from the crowd and said, "Master, you should compel my older brother to divide the family inheritance and give me my fair share." Jesus answered, "My friend, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" Speaking to the people, Jesus continued, "Be alert and guard your heart from greed and from always wishing for what you don't have. For your life can never be measured by the amount of things you possess." Jesus then gave them this illustration. A wealthy landowner had a farm that produced bumper crops. Every year the harvest was so great it filled his barns to overflowing. He thought, "What should I do now that I have every barn full and I have nowhere else to store more? I know what I'll do. I'll tear down the barns and build one massive barn to hold all my grain and goods. Then I can just sit back, surrounded with comfort and ease. I'll enjoy life with no worries at all." God said to him, "What a fool you are to trust in your riches and not in me. This very night the messengers of death will demand to take your life. Then who will get all the wealth you have stored up for yourself? The same thing will happen to all those who fill up their lives with everything but God." Now, for those of you listening, I don't know how frequently or how often, or if at all, you are familiar with this story from the book of Luke. As you do know, Luke does like to chronicle events in the life of Jesus in a way that seems to be chronological but also expository with regards to the issues of the day, while contrasting them with who Jesus is and what his mission was while on earth. And this particular story, for me, as someone who is a biblical scholar and has had to do the Greek and the Hebrew and all those languages, really appreciates this particular context, not for the sake of language or biblical study, but just because of what it highlights. If you think about it, Christians, or if you are someone who's new to the faith, you've probably seen this, or if you're someone who's been in the faith for a very long time, you've probably taken note of this. We like to intervene a lot in other people's affairs. And we like to feel like we can sometimes fix some things or solve some issues. And that in some way can be the case with a lot of issues, right? That we face in day-to-day society. Sometimes someone trying to cross the road, sometimes someone just needing help, some bus fare just to move from one place to the next. But this is a very interesting scenario because Jesus, after whom we try and model our walk after, in this passage says, "Listen, my friend, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" To two brothers who are fighting over an inheritance. And we do not know what the circumstances of their battle were. But Jesus does provide an extra warning, saying, not speaking just to the people who brought him into the midst of their fight, but to the rest of the crowd, saying, Be alert and guard your heart from greed and from always wishing for what you don't have, for your life can never be measured by the amount of things you possess. I feel like the current pandemic, and my wife and I, Maya, like to talk about this quite a bit. The pandemic has taken away a lot from us, and we found a lot to complain about, and rightly so. We found a lot that we feel is unjust or a little uneven about how things have been and how things are going. And if you look at the material stuff, material items, look at it from a material lens, we don't have enough food. We do not have enough clothing. We do not have enough of the basic essential things that we live on on a day-to-day basis. People are scraping to make ends meet. They're just barely scraping by. We haven't been able to see a thriving store and businesses and particular services really make it through this pandemic, and it's become a problem. And many people are asking right now, and I don't know who you are and I don't know what it is you're going through right now, but I think you can tell that it's not just the things that are going missing. It's the very aspects, character traits that we need as a society, as human beings, that help us feel seen and brave it through even the most toughest of times. These things that I'm talking about are like compassion. I'm talking about joy. I'm talking about reaffirmation. I'm talking about peace. I'm talking about being thoughtful to someone else. I'm not talking about just giving money to someone. I'm talking about just spending time and asking someone, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? Are you doing well? Are you feeling okay? Is your family well? And right now, especially during Thanksgiving, up here in North America, in the US, there's a lot we're asking ourselves right now about what's worth giving thanks for. And I feel, especially as a Christian, as a believing Christian in Jesus, we haven't been giving enough to feel like there's enough to give thanks for. We're not seeing the fruit of that joy, that love, that thoughtfulness that we've been called to do and be in the world. While there's so much harm, there still is so much hope. And this is what I appreciate about this text. And I don't know about you. Well, you and I can basically agree on this. We have seen a lot of families get broken apart and split apart during this pandemic. And oftentimes it's due to issues that are very similar to that of the brothers in this text, fighting over property, fighting over an inheritance that's due to them. Not that it was never due to them, but that someone always wants more. And the passage ends with Jesus saying, in the scenario with a rich man who was ready to just live his life and plan for his future, thinking only of himself, Jesus says, was it ever enough? Was it ever enough when we fight, when we claw at each other, when we brawl, when we cause the other pain and hurt? Was it ever enough? Is that the way to go in a world that in itself desperately needs better solutions? But if our hearts are not in check, can we truly be the light, the salt, the cause of joy, the reason why someone will gain peace during this period? Can we truly be the answer someone is looking for, even through these dark and very troublesome times? So I ask you, just to reflect with us here at Still Moments with Jesus, how can we best reflect that light of God in the world in the midst of so much lack and so much greed? And how can we make things better and know in our hearts that that God is walking with us as we make the right decisions. You are blessed, you are loved, and God is constantly thinking about you. Never for once think that you're alone. That greed we feel can only take us so far. But the yearning for God will not just take us further, it'll help us build others and take them to God's determined future and end. Be blessed.